talking about. We've got 2 more months of the Labour leadership contest before we find out who's going to take the top job. Quite a marathon with 50 hustings. For a number of observers, the race has failed to live up to expectations, and many are struggling to find a strong standout candidate. According to our next guest, the actor Warren Mitchell, lack of good leadership material sums up the problem with the Labour Party. There are just no firebrands even out there anymore. Here's his soapbox.
When the war finished, I was in Canada training in the RAF, and I was a devoted and devout Tory. I can remember saying, if that bounder Attlee gets in at the election, I don't want to go home. Anyway, on the troop ship coming home, I met a devout and devoted Marxist who, by the time we docked in Liverpool, had converted me by the use of wonderful books like Hewlett Johnson, the Red Dean of Canterbury's books, and Sidney and Beatrice Webb's. And I arrived in Liverpool a devoted socialist. There we were, the first general election after the war, in 1945. And the Labour Party swept in. We were so joyous about that. There was Attlee Prime Minister, and Morrison, and Bevan and Bevan, and I think it was Bevan's wife, Jenny Lee, who was the first one to suggest government money might be spent on the arts. Of course, I was all in favour of that. It was a wonderful time. The Labour Party today, as you can imagine, is a big disappointment to me. I mean, the leadership competition doesn't impress me at all. I don't have any faith in any of the contenders. I think Harriet Harman, who'd been deputy leader for so long, would have made a wonderful leader, and I don't know why she isn't standing. If the old leaders of the Labour Party were alive today, they'd be turning in their graves. There's a mixed metaphor, if you like. What we need, comrades, is a few more firebrands in the Labour Party so we can get back to the old ideas of socialism. The people's flag is deepest red, it shrouded oft our martyred dead. So wave a scarlet banner high, beneath its red we'll live or die. Cowards sneer and traitors flee, we'll keep the red flag flying here, with apologies to Karl Marx and all the others who followed.
And Warren Mitchell is with us now. Welcome to the programme. You've complained about the sort of lack of firebrands, perhaps the lack of charisma in leadership material in the Labour Party, but do you think that's the same across all the political parties, that that's just the state of modern politics these days compared to when you were younger?
Could be. Perhaps people don't care so much. I mean, certainly in my day, people cared enormously. And although we didn't demonstrate quite so much, we didn't have all these protest marches. Although I remember going on one where Tutor Eid, the Home Secretary, had banned the May Day marches. And we still marched, chanting, "We want peace, we want..." And a copper standing next to me said, "So do I, mate. Oh, if you all shut up, we could go home and have tea."
Well, how very poignant. But doesn't that also say that some of those big ideological and big social issues that were obviously so important at the time that you're describing don't exist today? I mean, we are talking about very difficult economic times and the cuts, but there isn't perhaps the same sort of ideological passion because the ideological differences aren't there in the same way.
Well, I'm afraid that Joe Stalin did socialism a terrible disservice from which it's never recovered. Everyone hears the word socialism, immediately thinks of 1984 or Joe Stalin or repression and political freedom out the door. And that's where the Labour Party has to work to restore the idea of this socialist dream of a fair society and all important industries controlled by government.
Do you think, and you say Harriet Harman, do you think she would be good at sort of communicating that message?
Yeah, I think she's a lovely lady.
Do you? Have you met her?
No.
No. Why do you think she'd be so good then, apart from she's a lovely lady?
Well, she's cool and calm and collected when she answers. She's very good ad-libbing. I mean, off the script, she has good answers She's obviously done her homework.
And do you think she's a genuine socialist in that sense? I mean, do you think
I've no idea. I'll ask her to dinner one night.
Yes, as your next dinner party guest. I mean, John Denham, what do you say to the criticism that the Labour Party's lost its sort of mojo, its passion, you know, that it had before? Do you think that's...
No, I don't actually.
No.
I think that the party's commitment to fairness and to change is as deep as it ever has been. But I think
But all the parties are
nature
saying
of our
fairness and change, aren't
yes,
they?
but I think we all know what we're talking about and what the difference is. I think the truth is the nature of politics have changed. The sort of generations, the Nye Bevans and people who had to forge the skills to speak to 1,000, 2,000 people. Your modern political skills, whether you like it or not, are more about can you talk in the television studio? Can you come like a human being into somebody's front room? I agree with Rory entirely about Harriet's performance, by the way.
She's done very well on Prime
She
Minister's
has
questions.
actually been tremendous.
She has
done very well on
last
PMQs.
few months. But most of the skills today are different to those that produced these big figures at an earlier year. But I think it's a mistake to think that belief or commitment is any less.
But are you saying that, do you agree with that, that actually there's no room in modern politics for a bit of firebrand sort of, you know, oratory and...
There's not an awful lot about the commitment to fairness and change in Lord Manderson's memoirs. So I'm not sure that the picture that John Denham is painting of his party entirely rings
Perhaps
true.
I spend my time with other parts of the Labour Party, Michael.
But what about big characters? I mean...
No, I think it is true. There is one huge difference, and you stated it in your question. When I entered Parliament in 1983, the Conservative Party was led by Margaret Thatcher and the Labour Party was led by Michael Foot. And there was an enormous gulf between the two on everything, nationalisation, nuclear disarmament,
Yes.
everything. And there's no doubt at all that 27 years on, the parties have moved closer together. I actually argue that the Conservative Party has won all the big arguments of the last quarter of a century. We weren't in government for 30 years.
But generally, there is...
You didn't win the social argument. You may have won the
Can I just-
economic argument.
Well, the
You didn't
economic-
win the social arguments.
Well, we won the economic argument, we won the defence argument.
Well,
the big things
well,
that would have...
before
You
we
now,
got about
you, now
that,
say
you
you now say you're in favour of the NHS.
In
In 1997, the Conservative Party was seriously questioning whether there should be an NHS. You may be about to do some very bad things to it, but you at least think you have to say you're in
We
favour
were
of
in
it.
favour of the NHS. But 1983, the big divisions were over defence and the economy, and whether the economy should be largely nationalised. And we comprehensively won those arguments.
Can I just ask Warren Mitchell very briefly, who would you be voting for in the Labour leadership contest?
Oh, Harriet, I think.
Well, but she's not standing. Do you like any of the
No.
others? Ed Balls, Ed Miliband, David Miliband?
I haven't really read their blurb and what they're
promising
fighting for.
Well, you've got plenty of time. You've got another few months
Another
before
few
we...
weeks.
Well, another few months
The
before we
ballot
get the
papers
result.
don't
Oh, yeah,
start
yeah.
till the end of August, do they? The ballot papers.
That's
Being a deputy leader of the Labour Party, she should be well versed in the internal politics.
Oh, I
And
think she's...
she would have been a
I think she's very well
choice.
versed. She would...
Probably why she isn't standing.
Yes, I think she wants to keep that role. She knows too much.
Oh, you old cynic.
Stick with us, Warren, because this next item I think will interest you as well. Because you all know the old saying, if you're not left-wing in your 20s, you haven't got a heart, and if you're not right-wing by your 40s, you haven't got a brain. Possibly comment on that, although this is true. But it does highlight what seems to be a common trend, that people move to the right as they get older. Just